Here's the 5 least played jobs in FF14. Astrologian. Its main feature being the card system, having a card available to draw every 30 seconds. 3 of the cards will give melee a 6% damage increase, and the other 3 cards will give ranged DPS a 6% damage increase. Compared to the other healers, because of the card system in Astrologian, it adds an extra layer of complexity and a busyness, let's just say, to the class, where you have to pay extra attention when you draw cards, making sure you are giving it to the right target, and having to redraw if you do not have an optimal card. Another thing is that it lacks any instant OGCD AoE heals, as a majority of his AoE OGCDs are regeneration over time, or is better to be delayed to the very end of the effect, which requires planning in advance, and it doesn't really have a instant heal everybody back to max HP kind of ability. These could be the reasons why people specifically play Astrologian, as they want to do more, have more planning required, more thinking required, and more busyness in the job. At the same time, this could be exactly why a lot of people also don't play Astrologian, because it's too busy, requires too much planning, and they prefer something less intense. And I think there are more players who avoid Astrologian because of this than actually play Astrologian. Next up is Bard. Its main rotations revolves around rotating your songs properly between 30 to 40 seconds and keeping your dot up at all times. Anytime you forget your dot, that's a huge amount of damage loss, and you have to reapply them one by one instead of refreshing both at once. Not only this, there's also a little bit of a whack-a-mole system with his Wondrous Minuet song, as well as his Refugian arrow, which requires a straight shot prog, and all these are pretty random whether you get the procs or not, making you constantly check between your hotbar, your song gauge, and the boss debuff. This is definitely the hardest physical range class to play, and when comparing to every other jobs in the game overall, I would say Bard is still fairly difficult. Despite being a fairly busy job, its DPS is not exactly the best. Now, its raid DPS is pretty similar with Machinist and Dancer depending on the fight, but its personal DPS is actually pretty low, just like Dancer, so you can go crazy and pop off, but you're still going to only do around 10,000 to 11,000 personal DPS. Whereas if you play a Machinist or any melee jobs, you instantly do up to 12,000 to 13,000 or even more. If you're somebody who enjoys all the physical range jobs, then it doesn't make sense to play Bard, as there's Dancer for better buffs and a lot easier, and there's Machinist for better personal damage, also a lot easier. Black Mage, arguably the hardest job to play in the entire game. Its core rotation consists of using fire spells to maximize his damage, and then switching back to ice to recover mana, and then going back to fire again, and then rinse and repeat. The rotation is fairly straightforward to learn, but as soon as you are in an actual fight where there are movement required is when we will start struggling and lose DPS. You have your triple cast that can help you cast while on the move, and you also have your ley lines, which will require you to stay still in that one exact spot. That reduces cast time and recast time by 15%, which is where a lot of the optimization struggle comes from. And just in general, you want to stay still as much as possible to get your fire rotation out before you switch back to ice, and because when there are actual movement involved, then that timing might get messed up, and a lot of the times you end up dropping your fire, and when you drop your fire you just lose all your damage, and then you might as well just play a summoner instead. And when we take a look at the damage, it has the highest R DPS out of every single job, despite not having any buffs for your team. You will dominate the DPS chart easily if you are a good Black Mage player. However, for most players, the effort is simply not worth it when you can just play something like a summoner who actually does pretty solid damage and is often classed as the easy job to play, without the need to plan ahead, strategize on your movement, how you should save your triple cast, etc. Because summoner, half the time you're not casting at all, so you have a lot more freedom and room to move around, which makes it a lot easier to play, especially for endgame content. Red Mage, its main feature being that it is a caster job, yet you also have a melee combo. And after each cast you get a dual cast, basically an instant cast, and you alternate between using your ranged spells, and once your mana gets to 50 you dash in for a melee combo, and then you just rinse and repeat. If we take a look at the total raid damage of Red Mage of the current tier, it's actually at the bottom of the list, pretty much tied with Dancer, which is kind of sad to see considering there is Summoner, which is a lot easier to play and just does way more damage. So from an outsider perspective, someone who's looking to get into a caster job there's not much reason for them to pick Red Mage at all when there's Summoner who's easier, does more damage, or there's Black Mage who does big damage, more difficult and challenging to play. And so Red Mage is stuck in this awkward position, like kinda in the middle. You would only really pick Red Mage if you really like the aesthetic, the play style of the job. Monk, I would say, is one of those classes that has a fairly high skill floor, meaning that to play the class at a basic level, you need to spend a decent amount of time learning the rotation. As when I was learning this job, the rotation probably took me the longest to understand just at the basic level compared to every single other job I played so far. The core complexity of Monk is that most other jobs have a 1-2-3 combo or 1-2-3-4, but for Monk is 1-6, and you can interchange most of these. So you can go 4-2-3 or 1-5-6 or 1-2-6. And as well as managing your personal damage buff and damage over time on the boss. The GCD timer is also recommended to be at around 1.93 seconds, so that makes the job a lot quicker as well. All these things add up to create a very chaotic and fast-paced job for somebody who's never played Monk before. And it's most likely the reason a lot of people get overwhelmed by this job at the beginning and shying from it because it is more difficult to get into than the other classes. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you found the video helpful. If you did, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more future FF14 content. And click here to check out my other video where I talk about the 30 unspoken rules in FF14.